This is the Cardiff Business School podcast, where we explore the power of public value. Today, my guest is Dr Alison Parken. She's a lecturer in the Employment, Organisation and Management section of the Business School. Alison's work is focused on employment and gender, particularly on the gender pay gap as it applies to women in the workforce. It's an area where she has worked in many years, particularly in terms of resolving key policy issues, driving policy forward, and helping employers develop fair approaches to work and employment within their own organisations. Alison, here we are.
Hello.
Where can we start with you? Well, let's start with a bit of history, maybe. You've joined us fairly recently.
Yep.
You've obviously been doing other things.
Yes, I've joined the business school on a kind of permanent basis about 3 years ago. But my early career was in advertising and marketing. So I worked for a radio station and then an advertising agency with national and international clients doing business to business and consumer marketing.
Which is a long way from where you are now.
Yes. So yeah, in my mid-30s, I thought it would be nice to know something. Great advertising and marketing is great. It's very busy. It's a very full-on kind of career. You have to be totally invested in the organisation that you're working for and the organisations that you're, working to create marketing campaigns. But then I think for me, I got to my mid-30s and thought, well, actually, selling another loaf of bread or another, business-to-business unit of whatever, it's just not maybe what I want to do with the rest of my life. So, yeah, I started doing an OU degree.
Open University?
Yep.
Oh, how interesting.
Yep.
What subject area?
Well, social sciences, broadly social sciences.
Okay.
And then I was incredibly lucky. I applied to Bristol University to a group of women who were running a master's in gender and social policy. Mm-hmm. So I hadn't completed my first degree, but I was lucky enough to meet fantastic women like Reese.
Oh, you met Reese?
Yes,
okay.
And Liz Bird and Jackie West. And they looked at some of the work that I'd done and they took my career experience into account. Okay. And they let me join the master's programme on the understanding that, I needed to get a first in all my essays or almost all my essays. Otherwise, I'd be leaving with a diploma. But if I did well, I could go on and do the master's dissertation, which I did. And then Terry Reese very quickly said, I think you should be thinking about doing a PhD, which hadn't been my plan. I thought I'd probably drift back to marketing or, economic development work as well I'd been doing. But she was brilliant. She was one of those women that, look after other women coming up through their careers. Yes, and she got me on a research bid that she was working on, which kind of tided me over the writing of a... Yeah,
she's always been much more than just a role model, hasn't she? She's always somebody who made things happen, which I thought was interesting.
Yes, I mean, sadly, recently she died.
She passed away. Yeah.
And at her wake, there were similar conversations going on around the room about how much difference she had made to the lives of people in academia, in government, in statutory bodies, that kind of little piece of advice, and then it's up to you how you go and use it. But yeah, so I was really lucky that Terry persuaded me. It influenced me, supported me, if you like.
But then a PhD is a very different proposition
Absolutely.
to selling airtime on radios or whatever.
Yeah, and you need a passion for it.
Yes.
So especially if you're a mature student, your income has dropped considerably.
Of course.
You have commitments. You've got to have a passion to take you through 3 or 4 years of study and come out the other side whole and still wanting to work in that area. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to pursue a academic career at that point. I had, lots and lots of experience of working with employers. The PhD work I did on mainstreaming equality and managing diversity meant that, it was useful pretty quickly to employers.
Of course.
And so I was doing lots of freelance consultancy work, working with the then Welsh Development Agency and the Welsh Government and other employers, advising them around mainstreaming equality in the workplace. And then I went to work for Stonewall Cymru as their first director.
Okay, right.
And was involved in working with the Senedd and being on the Standing Equality Committee at that point. Okay. So we were guest advisors with the Equal Opportunities Commission.
So you must have a list of contacts to die for.
Well, I'm getting on a bit. So, I mean, I think in the last 20 years, of working in Wales across, a number of different sectors: higher education, the voluntary sector, with private sector employers, government, and just been really fortunate in the context of Wales because of the equality duty and the devolution settlement, which is about promoting equality, which is akin to the mainstreaming idea that we understand what the drivers of inequality are and stop them being reproduced generation after generation, that I have been surrounded in all of those different sectors by people who want to do the same thing.
Yes. I mean, your time had come in that sense, I suppose, or you were there at the right time. But on the other hand, you're part of that process and making change, making a difference.
Yeah, I like to think so. But it's about time and place, actually.
For sure.
Totally time and place. I couldn't have done the work that I have done if I'd been researching and working in England. This was an absolute moment for
interesting, yes,
a change of thinking about equality and how to embed it in everything we do and decision making, and so it's been a fully collaborative effort for the last 20 odd years.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that we're trying to convey with the public value mission, in a sense, is that we are very much rooted in our place, as a university and as a business school. So we have close links with Welsh Government, of course, but it's also that ethos, that understanding of that we're on the same journey in that respect.
Yeah.
And so the future Generations of Wales Act, for example, is very much akin to our view on the grand challenges we face as a business school. Yeah. And so there is a certain amount of resonance there. But what struck me about looking at your work is you've been heavily involved in policy, much more than most academics would be. And I'm curious to know, why was that? How did you end up going down that very policy-orientated route?
I think it's about making change. So, so Masters, Gender and Social Policy, PhD, Workplace Policy, and then, as I said, making a decision not to go into an academic career and climb the greasy pole, but actually to use that research and be an evidence-based scholar in a policy arena.
Interesting definition. Evidence-based scholar in a policy arena.
Yeah.
I'll take that away and use it when I can.
Yeah. Well, because
no, but it's really important, because that stepping out of the kind of theoretical mold and the metrics that are used to evaluate people in that role are very different to how we would consider a person like yourself.
Yeah, I don't really fit in academia at all.
And yet here you are.
And yet here I am. And that again is the end of another very long story. The beginning of the work on gender pay gaps in 2008, 2009, when the EHRC asked us to do a case study. So the Equality and Human Rights Commission.
Oh, okay.
So set up in 2006 when the pre-existing commissions for disability, race and gender were amalgamated with the other three strands.
Bundled into that one area.
Yeah, so and they were then advocating for sexual orientation, religion, and belief and age. That's it. So they all came together. So the EHRC in Wales, and this is where I bring in my prop.
Okay. That's a prop.
I've brought
That's
a spade.
That's the most impressive prop that anybody has brought along to a podcast.
I've brought a spade with me. Okay.
Beautiful. Very good condition spade.
Yes.
But it does look used, which is encouraging.
Yeah, I think it has been used at some point, but polished for the occasion. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, so where were we? So mainstreaming equality, but with a real focus on women's employment throughout in my kind of research career. And the EHRC asked myself and a colleague if we would do some research with one of the local authorities in Wales that had settled their back pay claims and undertaken job evaluation as part of a process of all local authorities being required to do that
to reconcile their pasts
in England and Wales. Yeah. And that movement to doing that work had been patchy. Mm-hmm. And as we know from what's happening in Birmingham and Glasgow, for some councils, it's still going on.
Yes,
but
indeed.
Way back in 1997, the single status agreement came in. Work had progressed very slowly. But by 2007, 2008, some of the more proactive councils had actually started to lift the veil on their old pay and conditions. The White Book for manual workers. I think the Red Book for senior managers and things. Okay. And we're working towards creating a new single pay scale called the
Terms and Conditions.
The Green Book, Terms and Conditions. But as part of that, they had to do an equal pay audit, and they had to go back and work out how unfairly they'd been paying mostly women, but not always women, over the previous years. And they could offer a back pay settlement. So the employer and the unions would work out the deficit and offer an average, and workers were offered the chance to take that back pay settlement, or they didn't have to take the back pay settlement. They could take the employer to court and try and get a full settlement, so a full restitution of the money they'd been underpaid over the previous 10 or 20 years. But we did this case study, and obviously I knew the theory of equal pay. I knew what gender pay gaps were and how you calculated them. I knew how inequalities in the workplace arise through our legacy of breadwinner homemaker systems, all built into the paying conditions on an unconscious level. But I was sitting actually with a group of mostly women, cleaners, school cleaners, healthcare workers, residential care workers, who were having a presentation from the employer and the trade union. Again, that kind of Welsh approach of collaboration.
Interesting, yes.
And a slide was put up, and it said, right, here's how we've got to this position of unequal pay. And there were a number of different jobs listed in the first column, and then women's pay in the second column, and that was all basic pay. And then the jobs that were mainly dominated by men in the third column, basic pay plus bonuses and overtime, potential shift working. So in the old pay system, there was a head school cleaner, if you like, on grade 3, and a grave digger, hence the spade. So assessed as having the same kind of skills content, task content, job role content, both on grade 3, but he got a bonus.
Right.
And this pay system had been around for 20, 25 years, and nobody really knew why the men in column 3,
it
no
just
matter,
was.
yeah. And so, and also the local government is one of those sectors where gender segregation is so clear still, in the very, very different jobs that men and women do. And that old attachment to that breadwinner legacy was so clear, not only in things like the bonus payment, so a light bulb went on for me, aha! And so I'd retained this image of the grave digger and the, one getting a bonus, one not. But also that his work was more likely to be organised on a full-time basis.
Okay, yes.
And her work was very much more likely to be organised on a part-time basis, with the assumption that women only wanted part-time work.
Yes, because they would be dealing with the children out of hours, etc., etc.
Yeah. So we did that case study. And then because of the Equality Act coming in 2010, the Welsh ministers for the first time had the opportunity to set out their own specific equality duties under the public sector duty. And the Welsh government had been waiting for this opportunity for many years. They've been running equal pay campaigns, again in collaboration with the Equal Opportunities Commission and the trade unions, trying to help the public sector get their pay audits through, helping SMEs with toolkits to understand equal pay, voluntary approach, encouraging.
But at least trying to move things along.
But they had not agreed to regulate for the 2006 gender equality duty, because the wording around equal pay and gender pay gaps was, have a view to having an objective to considering the gender pay gap.
A little bit too vague, possibly.
Well, a little bit too vague, and considering they'd already had 3 or 4 years of gender pay gap, equal pay campaigns by 2006, it felt a little bit like going backwards in Wales. So they didn't bring in that duty. They waited until they got their own chance to bring in their own equality duties. And so in 2009, the Welsh government asked me if I would think about what kind of gender pay gap duty we might want in Wales.
Well, that's a responsibility.
Well, it was great, and again, working with colleagues, Teresa, various people who worked at the EOC. And again, a completely collaborative approach. So, I did the background literature review, what was going on in Europe, what was going on in the States and Canada, different approaches in different countries, why we have gender pay gaps, classic academic approach, right? What's going on here? And once we know what's going on here, then we can think about
sort it out,
options. And then we held a focus forum here in the business school, actually. The then dean Bob allowed me to have his conference room. Right. And we had 25 people from public sector in Wales, so human resources managers in Wales, trade unionists from Wales and Scotland. Scotland were interested in what we were doing as well. 7 or 8 academics who've been working on equal pay over the years, our statutory bodies, the EHRC, and Welsh Local Government Association. And we came together and we set out 6 options for them. And they chose the unique equal pay duty that we have here in Wales. And the reason it's unique is that it asks employers to understand the drivers of gender pay gaps.
Not just the outcomes as they observe them, so to speak.
No. Different than the UK duty, which is to publish 6 numbers on the website. This requires an understanding of what's driving gender pay gaps. So the different jobs that men and women work in, the different conditions, the different hours of work that they tend to be offered, the overrepresentation of women in temporary, agency, fixed-term contracts, the promotion disparities, the issues around childcare and flexible working, and understand what's going on in their organisation.
I mean, I can see the value of it, and it's been, I think quite a difficult journey sometimes, but it's been an important one. But how far do you think you are able to see positive outcomes as a consequence of this work?
Well, the approach that we took, so we chose the duty, the approach that and then, so this is this serendipitous, as you said earlier, being around for a while, knowing lots of people, and taking people with you on that journey. So in that group of people who chose this duty were, people who would have to implement it, people who were interested in seeing it work.
Yes.
And subsequent to the duty coming in, we were approached by the Wales European Funding Office to ask if Terry and I would think about running a project to help implement the duty.
Oh, right. Oh, perfect.
Yeah. I mean, not entirely easy, obviously.
No, but doing considerable help.
Yeah. Well, and we don't have these European funds anymore, sadly. But and the beauty of them is that besides doing the research work, we were able to employ change managers to help employers do the work. But anyway, we had 3 large public sector employers who volunteered or were recruited to come on and do this work, and they trusted us with their data. And we did the analysis for them, and we did sets of recommendations, and then we had change agents work with them to do the difficult stuff. And to coach operations managers and estates managers.
Yeah, and it has to work all the way down, doesn't it?
People who had not had anything to do with, what is this to do with my job?
Yes, of course.
Taking this out of the HR department and making it about the business, about fairness as well. And we know from those case studies, we've got some hard numbers. We've got about 80 women who had come out of working for the NHS and gone on to the bank, who would then possibly being employed back at the same hospital, but by an agency, which was costing the NHS a lot more money. But the reason they were doing it was because they could get flexible hours.
Yes.
They could get flexible shifts. So, the employer worked with them and talked about flexibility, and we got about 80 of them back into permanent work, which is great because then they continue on their continuing professional development. They're back in their careers.
Yes.
With the local government case study, we were able to show them from the data that about 11% of their women staff were working 2 or more part-time jobs with the same employer.
With the same employer?
With the same employer. So
That's astonishing.
They were trying to build enough hours of work
to make it meaningful.
To make a living. I mean, this is not pin money.
Yes.
So we began to say, well, why are the jobs they do constructed on a part-time basis? They have little choice but to work for you on a part-time basis. The jobs where women dominate in the local government are all pretty much offered on a part-time basis up to grade 5, and then you're into some of the professional jobs. And as you go up the grade structure, the incidence of full-time and permanent work increases, and as you go up the grade structure, so does the representation of men increase. So in the local government case study, 75% of staff were women, 25% were men, and men were overrepresented in all those higher grades. So they could start to see, it's about the structure of work. It's not about the percentage or necessarily the pounds. It's the structure of work here. We've made an assumption that women are happy to work part-time.
Yes, and so they've effectively structured it in a way that compels an unhappy choice on too many women.
Yeah. So, in the last few years, the number of men working part-time has increased considerably because the labour market's changed with 0 hours work, gig work, self-employment. And the term involuntary part-time working has started to come in.
Okay.
And we're like, hang on a second.
Yeah, you've been there already. Yeah.
This has been women's experience for many years, but because of the assumption that, women's earnings are peripheral to the household, which is no longer true. As we know, you need, 2 earners in almost full-time work these days to keep a household out of working poverty. So peeling the onion. So again, those women were asked about the hours of work and the kind of contract types, and also they were asked about job progression. And the local government redid all of their job descriptions and started to try and create job ladders and pathways. Same thing in the local...
Which is a major undertaking, of course.
A huge undertaking. The same thing in the health service. So, there was work in... The only grade 1 jobs in the health service were in the laundry. And, of course, all staffed by women working part-time. And there was nowhere to go. There was no chance of progression.
That was it.
Yeah. So working with the change agent and the union and the Wales Union Learning Fund, those women got some literacy training, some help with applications, and a kind of potential pathway into healthcare assistant roles where you can get at least a grade 3 or possibly 4 was made. So it's job switching was brought in, people in corporate departments who were using the same software as IT people, and their jobs were capped off at a grade 4, mostly women, mostly working part-time, did some, job shadowing with the IT department. Starts at grade.
It seems like the more you look, the more you find.
Yes, it's like peeling the onion.
It's incredible. Yes.
So again, you could move them onto a career pathway and stuff. So, and the university we work with completely redid their progression and promotion system. Yes, and we also did some qualitative work with them. It wasn't that women weren't applying for promotion; they weren't getting through. Yeah. So, in the reports, in the ref reports about WAVE, women adding value to the economy, there's lots of hard numbers. But I think the other thing, Peter, that was so great about it, and I still have people say to me, wouldn't it be great if we had another WAVE now, another WAVE project now, was that there was a sense of excitement about it.
Yes. And then you have momentum, then you have a willingness to change.
People were wanting to be involved and wanting to make a difference. And, when you get change and you get movement, that creates, again, its own sense of dynamism and enthusiasm. Yes. And, stuff that has always been, this is the way we've always done it, starts to become possible to look at it and starts to become, and these employers were incredible. They invested well beyond the end of the WAVE project.
Yes, and that's going out on a limb, isn't it?
Yeah, but even after we'd finished the project in 2015, 16, we still kept in touch with them and, we still offered discussions, advice, support, and we still did some analysis. But they carried on. They created a long-term action plan. So I say again, not like publishing 6 numbers on a website, which you have to do as an organisation over 250 employees. You do, under the duty, need an action plan. You do need to review that action plan every year and show the progress you're making. So it encourages action, but it encourages long-term action. So that is why I say the Welsh gender pay gap duty is pretty good.
Well, Alison, we haven't even touched on the green skills.
No,
and we've run out of time. and I think this is testimony to the depth of knowledge, the understanding, the insight, the experience. It all comes through, which is tremendous. It's tremendous to see this work being done. It's comforting to know that we're, as a business school, participating. Yeah. It accords so neatly with our public value agenda. And we haven't even talked about the green skills, which is, in a sense, I'm going to have to ask you back.
Yeah, do, because we're in the foothills of that discussion.
Yes.
And if we're in the foothills of another economic transition, there is no guarantee that we won't just reproduce the existing inequalities that we've talked about in the structure of the labour market and job segregation. So, I'd be really happy to come back and talk to you if we make some progress in that area.
We will look forward to it. Thank you very much, Alison. Our guest today has been Dr Alison Parken. She's been talking with some considerable enthusiasm about her work in the realms of employment, fair pay, and particularly gender inequality, and trying to resolve some of those issues, not just about discovering and understanding, but actually changing the world in which women have to work day in and day out across Wales and across many other countries. We've seen some fantastic evidence of progress. It accords so neatly with our public value mission, and we hope to see further work in the future, particularly around ensuring that our push towards green skills, green growth and the green economy doesn't result in new inequalities or reproduction of the old inequalities that we've worked so hard to get rid of. Thank you very much, Alison.
Thank you.